what this UNDRIP is really is a UN bomb of mass destruction against Western civilization. Really, that's what it is. And they're using this indigenous issue, which a lot of people are going to fall for, including, the various different bands. But once they realize that basically they're putting themselves under the UN control through this or through their dictates, then it changes the whole story. We're at war is what's happening. We're under attack by the UN globalists, right? And they want to have it so that we will own nothing. They want to bring us into like a hybrid fascist communist type situation where the corporations and government work together, and we're the serfs.
This is Dan Dix here, reporting for Press for Truth. And as you can tell by the title of this video, UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, sounds good on the surface. But when you begin to peel back the layers of this onion, you will begin to see that the United Nations is using this idea as restitutions to masquerade for a massive land grab. And they currently have their target set on Canada, but Canada is not the only nation that they are seeking to do this to. Everybody may soon come under this. So joining us on the line right now to discuss all of this and help us break this down is Ron Vaillant, a man who's been covering this for over 5 years now. So Ron, thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us here today on Press for Truth. Now, the reason why we're speaking here today is because just a couple of days ago, somebody said to me on X, formerly known as Twitter, Dan, why don't you ever cover UNDRIP? And I thought to myself, I don't know, what's that thing again? Looked it up and was like, oh yeah, this is really bad. This is something that Press for Truth should cover. And I was pointed in your direction as being the go-to guy to speak to on this. So let's just jump right into it, Ron.
Okay.
What is UNDRIP? And what would you say are some of the main issues that people should be concerned with here?
Yeah, well, thanks, Dan, for reaching out. Appreciate it. I've been trying to reach you on this for quite a while, but so now we're finally doing the show. Well, basically, UNDRIP is a United Nations declaration, right? So right away, it's United Nations involved. And we know that the United Nations ultimately wants to be able to create a world government, superseding national states. And so that's a warning flag right there. But it's 20 years in the making to create the UNDRIP document. Actually, here it is right here. And it's actually not a very big document. If you look at it, it's pretty thin. So it's worthwhile. You can just go ahead and download it off the internet. Just look up UNDRIP document. And so it's 20 years in the making by the Indigenous experts. And and what you have to do in order to be able to understand UNDRIP is Article 26, which we will get into a little bit later on in our slide presentation. But really, this is the biggest untold story in Canada because it's going to fundamentally change everything. We're going to find that we're going to lose our land rights, like you say, the massive land grab. It's going to be a situation where resource development is going to be heavily curtailed to meet, UN Agenda 2030 SDG goals. It's also going to be a key factor in the World Economic Forum's declaration that by 2030 you'll own nothing. And so this is really a big thing, but it's been very tough. Like you said, I've been at this for quite a long time trying to let people know about it. And what I really wanted to do was get it on major media so that we could actually raise awareness in Canada and people could actually stand up against it. But the way it's been always since I learned about it in 2019 was that it's all done behind the scenes. Everything, all the negotiations, all the deals and everything else is going on behind the scenes. And the average person really doesn't know about it at all. But finally, we're having a nice break here. We're having a development here, like in BC, I believe, or maybe he's not. It's professor of law, Bruce Pardee, and he wrote a National Post article regarding BC's recent development, and that what they want to do is they want to consult with people until I think it's March 24th, and how the province is going to co-govern with the Indigenous folks as to the uses of Crown land. And so the air bubbles are coming to the surface, but what's going on below the surface is still the monster that people don't see. And so that's why we're doing this show.
You know, a lot of this comes down to the very definition of what indigenous means, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But you mentioned Article 26 as being particularly important to understanding just what they're trying to do here, as you said, behind the scenes. So maybe we could break that one down a little bit, and then we can go from there.
If you want to, then I sent you the different graphics in order, but it's further down. You can just see it if you can pull it up. But Article 26, what it states is, okay, now when you read the book UNDRIP or the Declaration, when you start to read it, it talks about that the indigenous, and one thing to note is that the Declaration doesn't define what indigenous is. So it's 20 years in the making by the indigenous experts, and they go ahead and they say, well, this is what the rights are for these indigenous, but they don't define what indigenous is. And we can get into that later, a little bit later on. But so that's a real thing. But when you read it, it says, well, the indigenous have the rights to their cultural and heritage practices and on and on. You go, oh, like, yeah, of course, and you're reading it. You say, of course, But then when you read Article 26, then it changes the ballgame. And then, so the way to understand the document is to read Article 26 first, and then see how everything else would fall into that. So Article 26 states that the indigenous, whoever they are, have the rights to the lands, territories, and resources to which they traditionally owned, occupied, or otherwise used. So in Canadian law now, you can have the indigenous using their words or as a document, as a legal document. If they say that they've used an area, that can be a legal document in a court of law now.
So they can make a claim to your land just by simply your own private land by saying they once used it?
That's right. It's actually what's going on. Okay, so in Campbell River Mirror, they did an article in 2021 and basically stating that it was a lawyer representing the Aboriginals. And he was saying that BCers are in for a great shock because most of the Crown land is going to be given over to the Indigenous. So that was back in 2021. And that, because I was trying to warn people about this whole thing with UNDRIP, and then that article came up and all of a sudden there's proof, hey, look at this. This is really seriously going on here, right? Now, one thing I should mention here, all throughout Earth's history, we've had war and conquests and all kinds of things. And, it's very difficult for us to go back and peel back the onion and or whatever. Like if you think of Europe and all of the different World War I, World War II, and all the different changes that have happened, borders and everything else like that, for them to go back and to change all that is just ridiculous to try and do that. The best solution is to go from where we're at, even though I don't like our situation, you don't like our situation, but here we are. The best way to go forward is to basically proceed, from this point forward and make changes that we need to. What this UNDRIP is really is a UN bomb of mass destruction against Western civilization. Really, that's what it is. And they're using this indigenous issue, which a lot of people are going to fall for, including, the various different bands. But once they realize that basically they're putting themselves under the UN control through this or through their dictates, then it changes the whole story. And so on one hand, people are saying, yeah, we're going to get our land back and everything else like that. But think of the consequences, because what has happened in Canada is we put trillions of dollars and hundreds of years of work and effort upon the land. Now, where's the reconciliation on that in this whole thing? It has nothing to do with it. Basically, what they're trying to do is they want to be able to, and all of Canada is being claimed right now. They want to be able to revert back to these various different indigenous bands. And
it's like they want to use the indigenous people as a means of being able to take this over. And hopefully some of the heritage chiefs in the bands will see this for what it is and not accept the offer and be kind of like, thanks, but no thanks. But we see
there are some who've done that, but unfortunately, palms are greased and everything else. And just, the fact that you could all of a sudden claim all this huge territory and start generating wealth off of it is, very compelling, I would think, but But okay, so BC went ahead and adopted it, in October 25th, roughly, of 2019. Yeah, and then I had someone in northeastern BC who reached out to me basically, and they had a ranch, they still do, and they would, go to the government and ask to be able to lease more crown land or even buy it. And they did it twice, and the government got back to them in a proper time, and everything went good. The third time they did it, they got the result a year later, which is back, when I was running in that election. And the letter basically stated, we did not know which Indigenous bands will be claiming the crown land around your property, so you're going to have to work it out with them. So the thing is, if they're claiming the crown land around that person's farm as being their territory, what about their farm? So right now, it's basically the crown land that's being, and people will say, well, yeah, give them the crown land. But it's not that. It's everything. It's a whole package, right? And then another proof on all of this is basically what happened in Vancouver, where you're in Vancouver, I understand. Okay, so Vancouver. So the Vancouver City Council, they went in and commissioned a UNDRIP strategy plan for the city. And I did a video on that basically. And that was at the end of 2022. And in that plan, it basically states that 3 Indian bands, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and I forget the other one, they basically are the rights and title holders of all the land underneath Vancouver. And this is actually upheld in courts. That's the whole thing. That's the thing about it. And people don't know about this thing. So then I go through basically this. I think the video is on my YouTube channel under Ron Vaillant. It would be called Vancouver Has New Owners, something like that. But anyhow, in this UNDRIP strategy plan, it talks about, shared finance, shared income. The police are to be educated on UNDRIP. You got, like their cultural sites, they want to be able to have those back, type of thing.
And even taxpayer money, as I understand it, will eventually be funneled into this directly from Canadian taxpayers.
Oh, absolutely. All of it. Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing, is that and not just the taxpayer money, but you got these politicians who are going along with it. And that's the key factor. So basically, the UN has this declaration. It only comes into force into Canada through the politicians, and it's not just the politicians. That's the thing. It's also going through corporations are going along with it. You got the leaders of the educational system forcing it down. So, in the school systems now, they basically are doing land declarations. We acknowledge that we're basically on unceded or, Indian treaty land or whatever, right? And it's an indoctrination technique. And when I was up in northeastern BC in 2019, it was going on up there for 4 years already. And I was campaigning, and I was talking to a business owner who does multi-million-dollar gravel contracts. And it's a small town, and he was complaining about, them having to do these land acknowledgements, right? And I said, well, it's a small town. Why don't you just get the word out that if they start a meeting with saying that we're on, Treaty 8 land, everyone just gets up and leaves, and there's no meeting, and keep on doing that. And he said it would be noted who left, and we would lose our contracts.
And I think the reason why that is because they use this notion that anybody who speaks out against this is racist against the indigenous community, which of course is absolute nonsense. So some people may be in fear of being labeled a racist just for speaking out about this, is just going to hush up about it.
Oh, for sure. It's just a stand down technique, right? And I was interviewed at the Prince George University, and the fellow interviewing me says, we acknowledge that we're on the unceded land of these different bands. And then afterwards I said, well, how come you said that at the very beginning? And he says, well, I have to. And I said, what happens if you didn't? He said, I'd probably lose my job, right? So it's a top-down thing that people are forced to do. And now it's going all over the place. Even in the NHL, you'll see it basically. And there was an Oilers game that they said that we are on the unceded, or we're on the treaty land, right?
Right.
Okay, so one of the things is propaganda to basically, mind wash everyone into this thing that we're on someone else's land. But the other thing too is that when you got mayors and politicians and whatnot saying that we acknowledge that we're on this land, it can be used in a court case down the road. using UNDRIP Article 26, stating that, you see, look, even these people are saying that, this land is our land, Okay, so that happened in BC, and with the Vancouver issue there, that was great to see that document, because now it's absolutely bulletproof that this is going on, because that's been the hardest part, because trying to educate people on this, they say, no, you're just exaggerating it. You're making it more than what it is. It's just political theater. They're just saying they're going to do this, and it's not really going on, and blah, blah, blah. And then what happened was, it was the end of 2021, and I would make videos, and it was a throne speech, for the new government with the Liberals there. And in there, they basically said a one-liner that no one caught, Rebel News didn't catch it, no other alternative media that I know. And it said, we will reintroduce an UNDRIP bill. So then I made a video, it got good traction, and then people reached out, and we started working against this bill. And so we did that. And so that happened in 2022, and it passed actually in June of 2022. And just when it had passed the House of Commons, that's when this whole thing all across the news went talking about the Kamloops graves, And all of that was strategically planned, obviously, because I had known about those graves 20 years earlier, right? It was an old story. And so it was a stand down technique. If anyone was to stand up against this issue now, would they be a racist and all this, everyone's emotions are all, wired up, right? But in that standing committee of Bill C-15, that's what it was called, Bill C-15. So Bill C-15 states that all Canadian law is to be consistent with the Declaration, which is UNDRIP, okay? And so there's usually a first reading, a second reading, a standing committee, and then a final vote. And from what I understand, they actually put the standing committee ahead of the second reading. There is kind of unprecedented. You can fact check me on that. That's how I understood it. But anyhow, there was two conservatives who were, sorry about that. There were two conservatives who were on that standing committee, and the conservatives is what we would look to as far as being the barriers of protection, for the conservative Canadian type of thing, right? And we had Zoom meetings with both of them. And so with Arnold Viersen, he's from Alberta, I said to him, this is probably the most important bill in Canadian history. It's going to change everything. How come you're not warning anyone? I don't see anything on your social media or YouTube channel. And what he said kind of blew us all away. He said, some things are better left unsaid. And we were all so shocked that no one said, why? Well, we knew why, because it's like standing in front of a freight train, he'd get killed. Right? Okay. Yeah. So there you have it. So there you have a politician who's on the standing committee. That's his, duty to be able to, he didn't even go ahead and leak the story out to someone, and get it out or anything. It was just go along to get along, right? And then the other one, Jamie Schmel, he was a vice chair of that standing committee. And to me, when I saw his, reactions and whatnot, because the whole 8-hour thing, it looked like a kid at high school at a party, kind of giggling and, like, what, did you even read this document? But anyhow, in our Zoom meeting, and normally I wouldn't reveal what happens in these Zoom meetings, but this is so egregious, and this is such a huge, monster situation in Canada now, that I am saying this stuff. So with Jamie, he said, it's a shame that no one knows about UNDRIP. And I said, well, isn't that on you? You're the official opposition. You're well paid. I mean, you got the capability to be able to warn people. And he says, yeah, but we need help, he said. Need help. I've been dedicating 3 years of my life to this. I haven't been working, I haven't been earning any money trying to warn Canadians and everything else and fight this stuff. And you're telling me this. But that was just BS, because he has not said a word since. Neither has any other MP. You're not going to, if you ever hear any politician talk about it, it's lollipops and rainbows and how reconciliation is going to be so fantastic. But all of this reconciliation, everything else that's tied to it, is all leading to the fulfillment of UNDRIP, because it's a whole box of crayons, Because now what happens in UNDRIP is that you're going to have, okay, so if they're claiming all the land now, and they will be probably given the land in various different ways, but So now all of a sudden you're on someone else's land. What rights do you have then? You're a renter, you're, a settler, I guess you'd say, on someone else's land. And if
Mhm.
they say, well, hey, that's important land to us, it's a sacred site, we need you to get off. Well, that's the way it's going to go, right?
Right.
And then on top of that, when you got UN Agenda 2030, which is really the big umbrella that all of this is under, that Stephen Harper, Pierre Poilievre, and the Khans, they're the ones who signed on Canada onto that in September 27, 2015. And then they handed off the baton to Trudeau, and Trudeau's been implementing it. But it's not just Trudeau, it's all the other premiers, and it goes all the way down to the city level, as we see with Vancouver, right? And so it's just an absolute monster. So Pierre Poilievre, I posted the video on my YouTube channel. He's talking about, the three various bands who claimed all the land underneath Vancouver. And he says, we're working out a deal where they can basically directly tax corporations for, use of their land. But what he doesn't say, and he makes it sound like it's just reserve land, he doesn't tell people that they're claiming all the land underneath Vancouver. It's just a pure con job, right? Making it sound really nice. But it sets a precedence, that so for the various different bands who do direct taxations of, things that are going on with their land. And it's going to roll out to you and me, I think, down the road.
Right. Well, in
Yeah.
terms of the 2030 agenda and the WEF's agenda of, you will one day own nothing and still be happy, maybe we can get into how this is being used to be a land grab for the UN. So it seems like on the surface that this is a good thing. We're giving back land to people who had it stolen from them or whatever. But in reality, behind the scenes, as you said, it's really the oligarchy, the system, the New World Order, who's going to, in the end, get this land. So how exactly does that work?
Well, I mean, when I see the legislation and I see UNDRIP itself, I don't see a particular connection of the UN being able to grab the land. But there are, like, Article 46 basically states, it's the very last article in UNDRIP, that no nation, no state, no group, can basically go against this declaration, and it all has to be in adherence to the UN Charter. So by Canada implementing this, I mean, it basically, in a proxy sense at least, is putting us under the UN Charter. That's where they want to go with all of this. Now, we have our Canadian Charter, yes, that supersedes it right now, but basically that's where they want to go with this whole thing. So in that sense, it'll put us under the UN Charter, right?
Right.
So there's that. As far as, some people think that, that the various different Indian bands won't be able to manage all of this, and then they'll basically have the UN guys come in, and then they will manage it, and then when it all collapses, and they'll just roll it all up. I don't see that. I don't see how that's possible. But one thing I do see, though, is that when people start losing, let's say, their fourth generation on their farms, they got 5,000 acres and it's their whole families there and everything else like that. If they're told to get off that land, they might just, start getting violent. And that's the whole thing. And they might say to themselves, well, hey, if there's no, the Indian bands that are claiming this land, if they're not around, then maybe I can keep my land. Like it's to me, what it's doing is it's leading us to a civil war type hot issue, to some degree, probably to a smaller degree than a bigger degree, because it's going to be incremental, piecemeal, right?
Do they have to present any kind of proof that they are the rightful owners to this land that they are claiming, or can they just say it's mine?
Well, what I've seen with the court system is they're saying that because they didn't, in their system, that they didn't, they were basically living in the Stone Age, right? I mean, they didn't have, agreements and papers and stuff like that, that they have to go by their heritage, and their verbal, history, right? And so that can be presented in the court of law. But on top of that, though, because it's, all these people are being pressured to go and say that we acknowledge that we're on their land, I think that is going to be, probably the big one that's going to, say, what's going on. Now in Calgary, what they're doing is they're amalgamating, big cities with the counties and surrounding counties, and they're making kind of like a pyramidal system. And so you got this Calgary Regional Planning Commission or board linked in with the counties that go around Calgary and all the small towns. And at the end of 2022, they had a meeting there, and there was a Métis chief from Red Deer, and he went down there and he basically was educating them that their land goes from Ponoka all the way down to the southern border, and Ponoka is north of Red Deer, so halfway between Calgary and Edmonton, all the way down to the southern border. Right. And these guys didn't say anything. They actually opened up their meeting saying that we acknowledge that we're on these lands, right?
Well, if there's no definition of Indigenous, couldn't this UNDRIP United Nations Declaration be used in other countries other than Canada as well?
Well, yeah, it is. It's going on. I mean, New Zealand, with the Maori, they're really far advanced as well. Australia as well. It's going on in the United States. So those folks down in the United States, they had better, listen up, because this is anywhere that, there's been colonialism, I guess, And I sent you that video there of David Lamenti. It's in the shorts section of my YouTube channel. And he was a justice minister. He stepped down now because of the corruption that's been going on. But basically in there, he says undoing 150 years of colonialism is more than just the mandate of one government. So think about what that means. What is undoing colonialism? I mean, if that's everything. If you drive on a road, it's colonialism. If you go ahead and fill up your vehicle at a gas station, that's colonialism. None of that would be here if it wasn't for the settlers or the Europeans coming here, right?
Well, and I guess then the question now is, how on earth do we deal with this? Because going up against the United Nations is almost like trying to hold back the waves of the oceans at times when they're literally stealing land. So what are some of the things that Canadians and other people who are seeing the threat here, what are some of the things we need to start doing today so that we can undo this this thing that's been around since, I think, 2007? What do we have to do to undo it all?
Well, it's pretty tough to undo it. It's a major force behind it. I mean, but what we can do practically, I mean, obviously, is to learn about it. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Tell other people about it and help them to understand it. If you can, go ahead and talk. It's the politicians who implement this on us. So educate the politicians. Now, if you go to your city or your town mayor or your county mayor or whatever, they're all beholden to, like has been proven in Alberta just recently, in Chestermere, basically the MLA, he toasted the mayor and 3 councillors, got rid of them because, and I talked to one of the councillors in another county, and they said that, because I asked, is the county a corporation? And the answer was yes, and that it's a subcorporation of Alberta Corporation. So it's at the provincial level that we have to really educate these people and get them to realize, hey, if you go along with this, you're going to go ahead and you're going to destroy it for your family and friends forever. And so you have to be able to, start standing up to this in whatever capacity. And obviously it's a delicate situation because they're under pressure too, right? But they need to get involved. And so our job of properly educating them as to what the consequences are a big deal. So that's one thing we can do. If you live in Vancouver, go watch my video on what the strategy plan for, and basically understanding that all of Vancouver's been claimed by 3 Indian bands. So, I mean, what are you going to do? When I presented that video, a lady just phoned me the other day and she says, when I saw that video, I didn't think twice. I sold my properties and got out of there. Do what you think you got to do, right? But I mean, basically that's the scenario, and the courts are behind it, from what I understand. So that's why the city has said, well, we acknowledge that these are the rights and title holders of all the land under Vancouver, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's what you can do there, is try to educate these people. If, because I think down the road with Pierre Poilievre and his recent press conference there with these 3 Indian bands, basically, saying that he's in favor of a direct taxation of corporations. So if we end up getting a taxation on our land, what we need to do is say, no, no, we're not going to pay that, because no, it's not your land. You know, we've paid for it. This whole system has been built upon the fact that we're here, right? And and fight it there, because, but the problem is that people, you know, they go along to get along. You know, they don't want to cause a ruffle, and they're, you know, most people don't want to put at risk the fact, you know, they've got their house and everything else on the land. You know, so maybe just pay this inconvenience tax of whatever it might be, and we can just, you know, carry on. And to go and fight it, you might end up going to court, losing your land, and all of that kind of stuff, right? So it's going to be a tough fight, you know, for people to even, you know, wrap their brain around it and to be willing to risk everything for it. But really, we're at war, is what's happening. We're under attack by the UN globalists, right? And they want to have it so that we will own nothing. They want to bring us into like a hybrid fascist communist type situation where the corporations and government work together, and we're the, you know, the serfs in a sense, you know. And it's coming in fast. And that's why I ran in the 2019 federal election, because I saw this coming, you know, and I was trying to warn people that, you know, the UN wants to be able to do their 2030 agenda, and it's going to change everything in our lives, you know.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
Yeah, it's hard for people to wrap their brain around that because it reads so nice. It's the ultimate political doublespeak, but it reads like a communist manifesto when you really analyze it. But the best way to get people to wrap their brain around it is what the World Economic Forum says: by 2030, you'll own nothing. You know, that's, people can understand that, right?
true. And I would have to agree. I think at this stage in the game, you know, awareness is going to be absolutely key. Education is key. Just getting Canadians and others to realize that this is even an issue in the first place is going to be important moving forward. So on that note, you know, you've been covering this, as I said, for like 5 years now. Where would you say is the best place for people to go online if they want to learn more about this from you?
Well, I sent you a bunch of links that are really pertinent to key videos that I've posted over the years. And so if you can just go ahead and put that in the comments section, pin it maybe, people can go ahead and follow those links. That's probably the best source. Other than that, there will be bcrising.ca. I sent you a link for the Zoom meeting there. You could probably maybe share that as well. That'll be on the 29th of February. And that's where Bruce Party, the professor of law, will be going over some of the key issues. He'll be speaking for the first half hour. And then myself and another fellow will be joining in, Joshua Lemons, and we're going to talk about this whole issue.
Perfect.
So that'll be very important. Yeah.
All right.
And
I guess in closing, is there any other kind of points you want to make, or anything maybe we missed that you want to cover on this one?
yeah, there's a couple points actually that are really key. With that Vancouver UNDRIP strategy plan, you can maybe pull up the graphic for people to see. And I like to go over some of it because, you know, Jagmeet Singh, whenever he'll be debating in different things, I remember with Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson there in the by-election of his, he, you know, called her a racist and stuff like that. And he's pretty quick to call people racist, right? And you get Trudeau doing the same thing. But in this UNDRIP strategy plan for Vancouver on page 17, there's a thing called environmental racism. Have you ever heard of that one?
Sound familiar?
Okay, environmental racism. Okay, so I'll just read a little bit from it. Okay, so hazardous industrial projects and other disruptive impacts from colonialization, and that's going to be a big thing that we're going to have to face, and urbanization infringe on the ability of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh to exercise their inherent constitution, human rights, including the basic rights to harvest, steward, and reside in their traditional territories, which is basically all of Vancouver now that they've claimed, right? Lower down, it says here, the city is to conduct a review of hazardous industrial projects from the lens of Indigenous rights, you know. Going down further, they're to co-develop and implement a policy to assess current and future industrial infrastructure development through the lens of Indigenous rights and title and environmental racism, you know. So the fact that you're building a project means that it's racism against, these bands. It's absolutely insane. And that's where they're going to go with this. And they're going to have them be the stewards of the land to save Turtle Island. If people don't know what Turtle Island is, that's their belief system, that North America is this turtle. And if you go ahead and put a dam on a river, you're blocking the arteries of the turtle. Or if you're mining, then you're disrupting the nervous system of the turtle. So they're going to be used. The UN is going to be using these different bans to curtail and shut down all kinds of industry and whatnot in the future, right? Okay, so another one, the last one here on that would be environmental initiatives to ensure that they address the environmental racism, climate action strategy, healthy water plans, and goes on and on. So that's one key issue. The other issue to end here is that we're all going to be forced into their thinking and into their understanding, and actually we are going to have to learn about their different religious, practices and stuff. For instance, if you want to graduate high school in BC now, you have to take a 4-credit mandatory course on Indigenous issues, and that's where it's starting. But let's say you don't agree with the course material, and you say, no, I don't agree, and you give different answers and you fail it. You're not going to pass, you're not going to graduate high school, right? And so on that, I sent you a graphic that I snapped of it. And actually, if you look at the bottom, I highlighted in the bottom right-hand corner, it says the legal status of First Nations, oral traditions. If you click on that, that's where you'll find that in a court of law, their oral traditions can actually be legal documents. Same thing goes with if you're a real estate agent in BC, you have to renew your license every few years, and you have to take courses. It's also with lawyers too. So everyone is being educated on this whole, traditions of the Indigenous and everything else like that. And also, educating you that you're on their land type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So this is massive.
Is one word for it.
Yeah. So anyhow, those are the last 2 points.
Yeah. Wow, this is such a big monster story, as you said. One of the biggest issues facing Canadians right now, and I would have to agree. I think a lot of people are unaware that this is happening in the first place. So maybe you could give a shout out to your X account, formerly Twitter, so people can keep up to date with you as you're gonna, I'm sure, continue to cover this as it continues to develop.
Okay, thanks. Well, it's Ron Vaillant, last name V as in Victor, Aillant. You probably put on the screen. That'd be nice. Okay, so I have a YouTube, channel where I post things, and I'm willing to go into the fringe, to experiment with different ideas of what's coming down. But I'm very good at seeing the future, and because I analyze what's going on and I can understand things. So it's a very good resource there. I'm on Facebook, but they're perpetually, censoring me there. It's under my name. Twitter, the same thing. It's under my name.
Okay, perfect. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to break this down for us. I feel we could have a conversation for 4 or 5 hours easily about this particular topic. And maybe we'll have to get you on again sometime to cover all the other aspects.
As things continue on, like I was going to do a show recently with Lahaina Fire and how that basically ties in for the American folks, and how that ties into this whole UNDRIP issue too.
Perfect.
But anyhow, so it's everywhere. So people need to, if you're on a colonial situation, that's been colonized by the Europeans, then this is going to be the way that they're going to be able to strip the land away from you.
Yeah, well said. Thank you again for breaking it down for us here today. As I said, there's a lot to this, so maybe we'll get you on again in the future to delve into it as it continues to develop. But thank you so much for taking the time today to break this all down for us.
Well, thanks, Dan, for doing the show. This is very important.
No problem. Take care. We all want truth. The truth will set you free.